Hey everyone, and welcome back to our second episode of the GrapHER Club podcast. In this video, we're going to meet Kirsten. She is the co-founder of Talent Layer. I don't think you want to miss the story. So, stay tuned in this video. Hey everyone, so we are now here with Kirsten. She is from Talent Layer and we are going to meet everything about her. So, hi Kirsten, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Great to chat with all of our friends here in the Graph community. I'm actually calling in from the House of Web3 in San Francisco, which is run by Edge and Node. So, yeah, having a great day so far.
It's perfect. Okay, so now I want to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a quick introduction about yourself, maybe professionally or personally, whatever you want.
Yeah, so I'm Kirsten, executive lead at Talent Layer. So for the past 4 years or so, I've been in the blockchain space. So initially, I started off doing blockchain governance consulting and mostly working on like enterprise blockchain products. And then more recently, moved onto like the decentralized side of things, which I think is a lot more cool, a lot more vibey place to be. Before I got into the blockchain space for a few years, I was a freelance software developer working on like my own Web2 startups and like sort of freelancing to be able to afford to work on my own startups. And before that, I had a brief career in public policy. So I was working on like basically libertarian lobbying issues, but eventually I realized that if you want to have like a positive impact on the world, it's a lot easier to do that as an entrepreneur building tools for people than it is trying to change government because, yeah, it's just a lot harder. So decided to go into entrepreneurship and try to build things that have a positive impact on people's lives.
Okay, I think that is the perfect like combination of entrepreneurship. Like you are like you take risks, and of course you are in this like blockchain world because you are taking it. So I think that's great. I want to know a little bit about your journey, like from Web 2 to Web 3. Like how was it? Do you think it was really hard for you to adapt or to just, I don't know, make yourself comfortable in this world?
Mm-hmm. So I would say it was like sort of natural for me from a few standpoints. And I would say I like eased into it as well. I didn't like just completely jump into, I don't know, like degen yield farming world where things can be very scary. I had like a more smooth introduction. So I I was basically working on a Web 2 startup at the time that was like data data processing, data sourcing, and my co-founder and I were doing some technical research, and I just completely stumbled upon how you can build like data architecture software on Ethereum. I had been aware of Ethereum for a few years before because just being in libertarian circles, like people just interact with cryptocurrency, but it was always more me hearing about it from an investment perspective, like, oh yeah, you can buy this shitcoin and it'll go up. And I don't really care that much about that. But once I realized that you can actually build software on it, software that like can't be corrupted very easily, software that can't be taken down, software that's censorship resistant, that became something that I was like, whoa, this is absolutely groundbreaking. This is world changing. So at that point, I started to just go to different blockchain events. I was living in DC at the time, and I walked into a blockchain governance workshop run by someone that had done governance design for a number of like, L1s. And that was just groundbreaking to me because I came from like the political background originally, right? And I was like understanding how governments work. And I realized that blockchain technology not only was like, this really cool thing where you could build censorship resistant tech that'll be around forever, but also the sort of the way that these systems are designed also means they are little collectives. They're these governed collectives where people are coming together and making decisions on the future of this software. And there's so many really interesting parallels between like nation building and the design of like blockchain systems and how they're governed and how decision making, decision implementation works. So basically all of that just like really got me. I dropped everything that I was doing and I basically went to the speaker and was like, "Hey, can I help you with something? Like anything? I want to just work on whatever this is." And I didn't really have any previous experience in blockchain, but I did have all the government and like stakeholder relations, lobbying type background. So I started actually helping him coordinate a working group at the IEEE, which was a blockchain governance working group where we did research. And we grew that to like 200 contributors that were just contributing open source research to this like portfolio that the organization had. And through doing that, I ended up just also getting brought into different consulting gigs on blockchain governance. Like I said, this is mostly for enterprises. So this is when I say like I was eased into blockchain because I was really working with a bunch of corporations that were trying to implement enterprise blockchain, which it was is very very different than interacting with the sort of like Web3 purist like decentralized ecosystem. And I would say like I from a values alignment perspective, I'm like 100% like decentralization, censorship resistance, all of that. Um, so from that standpoint, it was also sort of, you know, easy to, I guess, adapt to getting into the more decentralized side of things. But yeah, the enterprise stuff was like an easy lead in, I would say.
I really like this bold nature that you have, like to put yourself out there and talk to this guy that did this governance workshop. It's like you jump right into the pool without any fears. Like you pursue what captivates you in this like Web3 world, and that's something that many of us girls doesn't do that very often. So I think that that's like a great example of go for it, just pursue your dreams. If it like motivates you, like go ahead. If it's something that like catches your mind, maybe you can like go for it. So I think that's
Yeah.
a great story for your path in this world. And now I want to like go into what's talent layer. Like I want to get to know like what do you do, but first if you can tell us a little bit more about what talent layer does.
Yeah. So Talent Layer is basically this API infrastructure that sits behind marketplaces, making them operate a lot more efficiently. So our basically the whole thesis is the biggest issue that marketplaces face is supply and demand issues. So particularly if we look at like freelance marketplaces, on an individual marketplace, it's really hard to hire for the right person. It's really hard as a freelancer to find enough work. And that's because there's uneven demand and supply. So what talent layer provides is a way for marketplaces that have too much supply or not enough demand for specific things, like I don't know, JavaScript developers. They can actually push their excess supply to an open network that can then be accessed by other marketplaces. So in the end, what basically happens is you can be using any marketplace and always get access to the resources that you're looking for. So it just makes like the whole market economy a lot more efficient and in equilibrium. And the marketplaces themselves can then take like a cut basically off of whatever they're supplying. So if marketplace A has like a hirer on it and that hirer has the work being fulfilled by a worker on another marketplace, both of those marketplaces can earn by supplying either side of the deal. So this is like the thing that we have out in the market right now and how it works. The longer term vision of what's possible when you have an open API like this is a lot more though, because when you all of a sudden make like just access to supply of workers or supply of food to get delivered to your house or supply of e-commerce items, etc., available via a unified API, you can build all sorts of really interesting new interfaces on this. So imagine like someone spins up an AI agent that can just ping the API and hire you a developer or buy you a hamburger or order you an Uber. um, this is where we see the future headed, like in the like medium to long term. We actually think that like most people will be interfacing with like the services economy, the goods economy, with these sort of new interfaces that are more AI driven. um, and we're hoping that we can be a part in helping enable that future.
Yeah, I really get caught with the API infrastructure because it's a powerful tool. Like what you're saying is something that we actually need, but didn't know that at that point, like back in time when there wasn't like talent layer. So, what inspired the creation? Like you talk about specific needs or gaps, but I want to deepen in this question. Like, is there or was there a gap in the market that you think that aim to address within the Web3 job landscape? Like, what was the perspective that you had at first? Like, what were your first thoughts about this like company that you were creating?
Yeah, so the initial vision for Talent Layer really came from our personal experience working on freelance marketplaces. And that's also like our entry market. It's where we're getting started, it's the market that we know the best. So for both me and my co-founder, we were freelancing for a long time while bootstrapping our startups and whatnot. And it was always really hard to find enough work on these marketplaces. Like I was a PHP developer, so I just be going and going, and like I apply for all of the open opportunities, and then you get to the end of the list and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Well, I guess I have to go to another marketplace. And then once I get to the end of the list there, okay, well, I guess I go to another one. And meanwhile, on all these marketplaces, you're like fragmenting your reputation. With every new account you create, it's more and more difficult to get work because you're starting out from scratch. And that was always like a really big barrier to being able to provide for yourself as a freelancer, because it just takes so much time to like go search in all these places, manage all these accounts, etc. And then when I started like having the flip side happen where I'm hiring people for my startups, I was using a lot of freelance marketplaces. And it was also really hard to hire for the right people if you're just using one marketplace, because the people are scattered across different places. So I would also be trying to hire and posting on multiple marketplaces at once. So for me, the real like motivation from a business problem perspective came from just having the liquidity fragmented across all of these marketplaces. And to me, this looks a lot like the world before DeFi, because you basically have liquidity for different assets fragmented across different banking institutions and financial institutions. And then meanwhile, you have something in DeFi like Uniswap, for example, where you can have like literally any interface in the world can just interact with Uniswap, and it doesn't matter as much like which one you choose to use. You could choose whichever one you fancy. And oftentimes the users don't even know that that platform on the back end is using Uniswap, but they all just work, and you can always access that liquidity that you need. So we figured, well, you could basically build that same thing only for the marketplaces sector. And then we decided to start with freelance marketplaces just because that was what we knew the best. Um, Another big thing though is, I talked a little bit about like censorship resistance before, but unfortunately, a big issue with all the existing freelance platforms is they kick people off for any variety of reasons. So, for example, every user in Russia and Belarus, as well as random people that had unfortunately lived in those countries once in the past like 5 years, were just blanket banned from Upwork, and a lot of other platforms within the past few years. And what do you do? Like, you were literally making a living one day on these platforms, and then all of a sudden you have nothing. Especially people that have been working on these platforms for like, I don't know, 10 years. You have that whole big reputation that is locked in that platform that you now can't access. What are you going to do? You're going to start new on another platform? Well, then I guess you're going to have to charge 50% less because people don't know your full like work history. So there's a lot of big issues around censorship resistance as well that we want to tackle. Basically, if you have unified user identity on chain, then you can allow people to, regardless of what platform they're using, even if a platform wants to ban them, that identity is still yours. And you can take that with you somewhere else, which is really the thing that is lacking today, that custodied identity. But that's getting in the weeds.
Okay. No, I'm in love with talent layer because that's something that we actually need. And I think that the whole idea is something that many people are interesting but did not know about. So in this episode, like, people are going to meet talent layer, and of course they're going to know what's behind it and what gaps does it cover. So thank you so much for that. And now I want to go into the next question, that it's like, if you can elaborate some of the technical aspects, because I think that you're integrating with the graph. So I want to like see how it enhances the platform's functionality and how does it work. Maybe not in that deep and way with the technical stuff, but maybe we can like get to understand what does the graph do with talent layer also.
Yeah, of course. So the graph is actually a super important part of our just overall product. So we sort of have these layers to our stack. So the first layer is the protocol level. So we have a number of smart contracts that do things like store the identity data or store information on a request that's been made, a product that's been posted, etc. So there is some data that is like literally in the smart contract. There's some data that is in the form of like soulbound NFTs, and there's some data that is just like referencing IPFS data. So this is like the base layer. And then on top of that, we need a way to easily access that data and just query it into front ends. This is where our subgraph comes in. So we about like 1 month ago launched on the decentralized service. So our subgraph is like completely decentralized now. And it basically just allows you to read in all of that juicy blockchain information and the IPFS information. And then what we have is one layer above that, which is a nice like API interface where the actual like platforms, when they're integrating talent layer, like you just like write some very simple interactions with our API and using our SDK, and then like you don't even have to like write your own subgraph queries and stuff like that, or directly call blockchain or directly call the smart contracts. It's just sort of abstracted away. So those are the layers that we've got, but yeah, wouldn't really be possible without the graph.
Okay, yeah. So I think that subgraph and indexing data is very important for, I don't know, any blockchain information that you're using. So now I want to like see some of your perspectives on gender in Web3. As a woman founder in the Web3 space, what has been your experience navigating in this industry? Like, have you faced any specific challenges or maybe opportunities that are unique to your gender?
Hmm. So, in general, I would say I don't like, for me personally, I don't like, and like granted, like I identify as a woman, but like I don't like walk around and see myself as a woman, like in the business sense, if you understand. Like we're all just
Yes, of
people.
course.
We're all just people that are like, building this cool stuff. And I think luckily in like the blockchain ecosystem, people at least in my experience have been very like accepting, egalitarian, like oh my gosh, coming from politics or working in the enterprise space, it's very different. Like I think Web3 is actually, even though we don't have like, an extremely high percentage of women involved, I think that from a cultural standpoint, things are like a bit better in Web3 than a lot of other industries that I've experienced. So I would say the only like sort of negative experiences I've ever had have been around like having conversations with VCs and then like hearing from friends that are guys that like those VCs just don't invest in women and stuff like that. And then it's like, huh, let me actually check their portfolio companies. Oh wow, out of 50, there actually is no women. Maybe this is a trend. And you really never know. Maybe it can just be a fluke, but I don't know. There's always some bias involved, and you know, you just gotta sort of keep going. Like there's not, I mean, we're of course like we're seeing a lot of like cultural change slowly, but in the meantime, like you just can't let it get you down. Like you'll be able to succeed no matter what if you just keep trying. So even if sometimes forces are against you, oh well, just keep going.
Yeah, I think that the Web3 like ecosystem is more inclusive, so there's not that problem of Web2 that there are not enough women in this ecosystem. Like I think Web3 is more inclusive, and I think I really I heard about the other episodes and other guests that feel the same way. So I think that this is actually something very good and positive for this world, because we're just people. We're not like
Yeah.
men and women. We're just us. So I think that's amazing. I want to address also like what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities? Like maybe we can talk about like women entering into like a
Mhm.
job Web3 sector. How do you think that platforms like Talent Layer contribute to addressing these challenges, like giving these opportunities and maximizing them for this gender diversity and inclusion?
Mhm. Well, so it's important to remember that Talent Layer is like an infrastructure, not a platform exactly. So there are platforms built on Talent Layer where you can find like job opportunities and Web3 and beyond. So just in general, like from a like on a high level, I think probably the biggest barrier for a lot of people is just like not having many role models. Because if you look around at like especially like leadership, like female leadership in Web3, it's like very very rare. I mean, of course, like at the Graph, we have Tegan, who's an absolute superstar, but like name another female infra founder that's like successful, it's like pretty damn hard. So I think that that can just be like a bit intimidating for a lot of people, like if you're entering a space where you don't have like very many role models. So that's one thing. Another thing is like generally in the blockchain space, everyone's like very high risk. Like if you have low risk tolerance, most people don't even consider working in the space. And generally I found that like whether it's like because of like society conditioning or whatever, like a lot of women that I meet seem to be like less risk tolerant. So I think that also has an impact on like the quantity of women that decide to jump into Web3. But in general, there's like literally so many opportunities. And also, there's a big deficit of like organizational mindsets and design focused mindsets, like human focused design, which generally I've seen like more women succeeding in, like in the overall world. That I think is like a big gap here. So you guys have a lot of value to bring to Web3, and I encourage you to jump in.
That's nice. That's maybe the purpose of GrapHER Club podcast also, right? To show the role models that are out there like you. And what advice would you offer to young girls or inspire women who are interested in pursuing careers or entrepreneurial ventures in the Web3 space, like particularly in light of any gender related challenges they may encounter?
Mm. So I would say what one thing that's like generally really important that a lot of people don't understand about Web3 is it's very like um I guess say evidence based, as in like you could maybe like walk into a corporation and get hired based on having a fancy degree and maybe working for other another corporation for a few years. But in Web3, like if you're a developer or a creative or anything like that, show your stuff, like what have you actually done. And this is another thing that you can do to get ahead. Like if you want to work for a specific project or ecosystem, just jump into the Discord and start doing work. Like, and sure, you might be like, okay, well, why would I work for free? But it's just like, this is sort of the vibe in the ecosystem. Like, people come in and you just do stuff, and then people notice that, and you share your work with other people, and then people are like, okay, wow, this person knows what they're doing. Let's make sure we can get them into some sort of role, or we should have the DAO create a budget for them and stuff like that. So, my biggest piece of advice would just be like, if you want to work in this industry, just figure out ways to go do things now. Like, don't just spend hundreds of hours like applying for things. most people get hired based on them doing something in an ecosystem, um, even if it's something small, just to like show who you are, start talking to people. And because everything's online, and also because everything's very like anon friendly, or like a lot of projects are anon friendly, you can like literally just roll up and get started. And this is like another thing that I don't know if like I would say is a tip, but if for some reason you're like very cautious about like being perceived as a woman, and you just like do not want people to even know, you could literally just roll up as an anon. And I know a lot of actual like female founders and women in Web3 that decide to do that, whether it's like initially or like just forever. Obviously, I'm like, I don't know, my own self around everywhere. Like, I don't really do the anon thing, but like, it can also have like, some advantages. Like, yeah, if you're really worried about like gender disparity stuff, no one can disparage you if they don't know who you are.
Yes, exactly. I think it's amazing, like the perspective that you have. Like maybe I would love this episode to be like 40 minutes long because I think that you have a lot to tell. Like you're a very interesting person, and I really did enjoy to get to know you. I have a final question because our time is also very limited today, but I want to like know the next steps of Talent Layer. If you can like share with us a little bit of what is coming for Talent Layer, what to expect, and if you want to share anything like very important for us, just to keep in touch with Talent Layer.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like a bit of backstory. So we launched our API product in November. So it's still very fresh. And what we're doing now is just building things that can growth hack the network and growth hack the API. So one of the things that we built last month that's super exciting is it was a chat GPT plugin for searching for freelance opportunities. And within like a few weeks, it became the number one chat GPT app for freelancing, had like 300 something queries. And it was also the first ever chat GPT app to use the graph, because it's like, reading information from our subgraph. So that was awesome. And that's just like one example of the kind of things where we're just trying to like hack together really fast, throw it out there, get a bunch of people onboarded. And for every person that onboards to these like little experimental platforms, these are people that are onboarding to the overall network of Talent Layer. And the goal is to keep launching this sort of product. Some of them are going to be successful, some of them are going to just be more short term. But with every single one, we're just growing and growing and growing and growing the network effect of people at the protocol level. And once we get, a larger network effect, then this is something that's even more valuable for existing marketplaces to try to plug into. So that's really the goal going forward. But if you're looking for freelance gigs, both inside of Web3 as well as outside of Web3, totally check out Freelance Search. All you do is like go to the Chat GPT store and just type freelance and it should show up.
Yes, yes, I will try to put the links of these socials and maybe
Right.
like a little bit of tutorial on this description on this episode. But I think I have a lot to think about this episode because you have a lot of knowledge, and I think that that's amazing, like to see, like to show to other girls or women that are aspiring to get into this web3 world, because you're not just a girl that shows up into web3 and did something. You have a knowledge and you have a background and you studied something and you saw this gap on this thing that was the landscape of marketplaces, and you take a shot and you did it, and that's where you are now. So thank you so much for this episode. I don't know if you want to share something more or a message to any girl or women or maybe person that is watching this episode. You can do it now.
Yeah. So I would say my main message is just you can do it. Like literally humans are autonomous. You can do whatever the heck you want, and literally if people tell you that you can't, okay, well, prove them wrong. Like who's out there to tell you what to do? you could absolutely succeed in anything that you set your mind to. So that's really the thing. And I look forward to seeing a lot more of you guys in the audience being on, the front pages of crypto news with your successful startups. And yeah, it's only a matter of time. So, got this.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for doing this interview, for being in this podcast, and I hope to see you in another opportunity, maybe in some event in person, IRL. So thank you so much, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Emmy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to follow us on every social media account that we have. We have also a little POAP for you waiting for you in the link in the description box. I hope to see you in the next one. But don't forget that the GrapHER Club podcast is all about empowering and inspiring more women into Web3. So I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good day and bye bye.